$14.22. That is what remains each month after Dorothy Mae Collins pays for her insulin, her blood pressure medication, and the prepaid phone she uses to call her sister in Mobile. Her Social Security check is $867. After rent on a one-bedroom apartment in Linden, Alabama, and after the cost of staying alive with diabetes, the math ends at $14. And $14 does not pay for a roof. But Dorothy, who is 70 years old and legally blind from diabetic retinopathy, was not going to sleep in a donated camping tent behind a Baptist church in Marengo County, Alabama, forever. So she found a rotting 1979 travel trailer at an estate sale, bought it for $250, and turned it into a fully off-grid home that she still lives in today, 4 years later, for a total cost of $447. This is exactly how she did it. Dorothy lost the central vision in both eyes at 62. She can see light and shadow, vague shapes at close range, but she cannot read a price tag or identify a face across a room. The tent she had been living in behind the First Baptist Church had a zipper that stuck in cold weather. The ground beneath her sleeping bag stayed damp from November through March, and she kept her medications sealed in a plastic bag inside a cooler to protect them from moisture. She had been on a Section 8 waiting list in the county for over 3 years. A social worker told her the average wait in that part of Alabama was closer to 5. But 5 years of sleeping on the ground was not something her body could survive. Her knees were bad. Her back ached by morning in ways that took until noon to ease. She needed 4 walls, a floor, and a door that locked, and she needed it for whatever money she could scrape together. The trailer was a 1979 Prowler, 19 feet long, parked in a field behind a farmhouse outside Thomaston, Alabama. The owner had died the previous year, and the children were selling everything through an estate sale. That trailer had been sitting in the field for at least 6 years. The tires were flat and cracked. The exterior aluminum skin had oxidized to a chalky white. One window was broken and covered with a piece of plywood screwed in from the outside. The inside smelled like mildew and mouse droppings. Dorothy heard about the trailer from a woman at the food pantry run by the Baptist church. The woman's nephew had gone to the estate sale looking for tools and mentioned the trailer was listed at $400, but nobody wanted it. People walked past it all morning. One man opened the door, looked inside, and walked away shaking his head. Dorothy asked the woman to drive her out there. She brought along Earl Dawson, a 74-year-old Vietnam veteran who volunteered with a local outreach group that helped homeless veterans and elderly residents in the area. Earl had worked in construction and mobile home repair for most of his life. He could look at a structure and tell you within minutes whether it was worth saving or whether you were wasting your time. He walked through the trailer while Dorothy stood outside running her hands along the aluminum siding, feeling the rivets and the seams, pressing her palms flat against the panels to check for give. Earl's assessment was direct. The steel frame and axle were solid. The roof had 2 soft spots, but was not leaking through in most places. The subfloor was rotted in the bathroom and partially damaged under the kitchen, but the bedroom end was dry. The walls had water damage along the lower 18 inches from rain entering through the broken window for years. The propane lines were corroded, and the holding tanks were cracked. But the aluminum framing studs behind the walls were still intact. That was everything. Aluminum does not rot the way wood does, and the skeleton of that 1979 Prowler was still holding. The skin was damaged, but the bones were sound. And that is all you need to start a rebuild. Dorothy offered the estate $250, and they accepted the same afternoon. A church member volunteered his pickup truck and a borrowed trailer dolly to haul the Prowler 14 miles to a piece of land behind the church where the pastor had agreed to let Dorothy place it. The arrangement was the same kind that exists across the rural South. Dorothy would maintain the lot, keep the area clean, and the church would let her stay as long as she needed. A handshake and a prayer. But buying a trailer and living in a trailer are two very different things. And what Earl found when he started pulling out the damaged sections nearly ended the project before it got started. The rotted subfloor in the bathroom came up in wet chunks that smelled like years of standing water. The water-damaged wall panels came out in soggy sheets. If the framing behind those walls had been compromised, there would have been nothing left to rebuild around. Earl checked every stud and joist for flex and separation. The frame was solid, so the rebuild was on. Replacement materials came from sources that cost almost nothing. A contractor tearing down a condemned 1990s single-wide mobile home about 11 miles south on a county road said, "Take whatever you want before it goes to the landfill." From that one demolition site, Earl and a younger veteran named Marcus pulled enough plywood to replace the subfloor, intact interior wall paneling, in a faded beige that was ugly but dry, a working interior door, and rolls of fiberglass insulation that had been compressed but were still usable. The second source was a Habitat for Humanity restore in Demopolis, about 30 miles away. Earl drove Dorothy there on a Tuesday when the store ran a half-price sale on hardware. They bought a bag of screws for $2, a tube of silicone caulk for $3, a used exterior door with a deadbolt for $15, and a box of mismatched vinyl floor tiles for $5. The church itself donated a partial roll of Tyvek house wrap left over from a siding project, 2 buckets of exterior paint in colors nobody wanted, and a stack of 2x4s from a storage shed behind the fellowship hall. But here is where the story becomes something nobody expected. Because Dorothy could not see the work, but she could do the work. Earl describes watching her measure boards by feel, running her fingers along a tape measure with raised markings that Marcus had scored with a utility knife so she could read the inches by touch. She sanded surfaces by hand, moving in careful patterns, checking smoothness with her palm after every pass. She applied caulk by feel, pressing her fingertip along every bead to find gaps. And then she did something even more remarkable. She designed the entire interior layout around her blindness in ways that a sighted person would never think of. Every surface transition inside the trailer, where the kitchen area meets the sleeping area, where the floor material changes, was marked with a thin strip of textured tape she could feel underfoot through her socks. Cabinet handles in the small trailer kitchen were replaced with different shapes so she could identify each one by touch. The dish cabinet had round knobs. The food storage had rectangular pulls. The cleaning supply cabinet had a hook latch that required a deliberate upward motion to prevent accidental openings. She memorized the exact number of steps from the front door to every important point in the trailer. 4 steps from the door to the propane stove, 7 steps from the door to her bed, 2 steps from the bed to the window. That interior design system is the reason Dorothy can live independently in a 19-foot trailer with almost no vision. But a trailer with finished walls and a clever layout is still not a home if it has no water, no electricity, and no heat. And in an Alabama winter, that distinction is the difference between shelter and survival. The off-grid systems were the most critical part of the conversion because the trailer was never going to connect to municipal utilities. Earl and Marcus installed a rainwater collection system using 2 30-gallon food-grade barrels. They got free from a restaurant supply company in Tuscaloosa that was discarding containers that had held cooking oil. The barrels sit beneath a gutter section mounted along the low side of the trailer roof with a mesh screen filtering debris. Alabama receives over 56 inches of rain per year on average, and Marengo County sits right in that range. The barrels fill reliably, and Dorothy supplements with water jugs filled at the church when needed. Water purification follows the same method used in off-grid and emergency preparedness communities for decades. A few drops of unscented household bleach per gallon, left to sit for 30 minutes. The annual cost for purifying all of her drinking water runs about $5 in bleach. Dorothy stores treated water in cleaned juice bottles, lined up on a shelf Earl built at a height she can reach without bending. Electricity comes from 2 solar panels purchased at a steep discount from a contractor in Selma who had a shipment arrive with cracked glass on 3 panels. The cells underneath still worked. Earl wired them to a second-hand marine battery stored in a ventilated compartment underneath the trailer. That system runs LED lights inside the trailer, a small radio, and a USB charging station for Dorothy's phone. Total cost for electricity was $85 for the panels and $40 for the battery and wiring. The ongoing cost is $0. Cooking runs on a 2-burner propane camp stove purchased new for $22 at a discount store. A 16-ounce propane canister lasts Dorothy about 10 days because she cooks simply: rice, beans, canned vegetables, and cornbread made in a cast-iron skillet donated by a church member. Her annual cooking fuel cost runs roughly $70. On mild days, she cooks outside on a plywood table beside the trailer door. On cold or rainy days, she cooks inside the small trailer kitchen with the door cracked for ventilation. If this kind of practical, resourceful building is something you want to learn more about, there is a free guide called The Veteran's Blueprint linked in the description below this video. It covers salvage sourcing, water systems, and heating setups step by step, written by people who have actually built these structures. Winter. Temperatures in Marengo County drop into the low 20s in January, and a metal trailer with no furnace becomes dangerously cold after dark. Marcus welded a wood-burning stove from a steel barrel and fitted it with a chimney pipe that exits through a fireproofed hole cut in the trailer roof. The hole was lined with a double-wall chimney collar and sealed with high-temperature silicone to prevent leaks and reduce fire risk. Marcus had learned welding in the Army and treated the project like something that would be inspected, even though nobody was inspecting anything. The barrel stove sits on a square of cement board placed over the vinyl floor tiles to protect them from radiant heat. Firewood is free and abundant in rural Marengo County. Earl and Marcus split a cord of oak and pine for her each fall, stacking it under a tarp beside the trailer. Dorothy feeds the wood-burning stove by feel, opening the heavy iron door with a leather glove, placing split logs by hand, and adjusting airflow through a damper she operates by turning a wing nut she identifies by touch. On the coldest January nights, the barrel stove brings the interior of that small trailer up to nearly 70 degrees within an hour. The bathroom was solved with a composting toilet built from a 5-gallon bucket, a standard toilet seat mounted on a plywood frame, and a supply of sawdust from a sawmill outside Linden. The system produces no odor when maintained properly because the sawdust suppresses the bacteria that create smell. Dorothy empties the bucket into a composting bin behind the trailer every 5 to 7 days. The total cost when the conversion was complete came to $447. That is $250 for the trailer, $25 for materials from the Restore, $85 for solar panels, $40 for the battery and wiring, $22 for the camp stove, and $25 in miscellaneous supplies, including caulk, screws, and paint. Everything else was salvaged, donated, or built from materials that would have ended up in a landfill. That was 4 years ago. Dorothy has made quiet improvements since then. A second solar panel was donated by the same contractor in Selma when he had another damaged shipment. A small covered porch was built by Marcus from pallet wood, where Dorothy sits in the evenings listening to the radio and peeling vegetables for dinner. There is a clothesline she navigates by with a guide wire running from the trailer door to the first post. Curtains were sewn by a woman from the church from fabric remnants. The interior of the trailer today looks nothing like the gutted shell Earl walked through in 2021. The walls are clean paneling, painted a soft yellow that Dorothy chose because she can still perceive warm tones as a faint glow. The floor is smooth vinyl tile with her textured transition strips between zones. The bed has a foam mattress donated by a furniture store in Demopolis that was clearing floor models. Shelves are lined with canned goods and cleaning supplies, each section organized so Dorothy knows exactly where everything is by position and touch. Her medications sit in a small basket on a shelf by the door, arranged left to right in the order she takes them each morning. Dorothy's monthly living costs today total about $160. That covers propane, food beyond what the food pantry provides, phone service, and hygiene supplies. She pays no rent, no utility bills, and no mortgage. The $867 Social Security check that once left her with $14 after medications now leaves her with over $700. She has a savings account for the first time in her adult life. Earl still stops by twice a week. The outreach group he volunteers with helped 2 other elderly residents in Marengo County set up similar living arrangements over the past 3 years, one using an old camper shell and another using a storage shed converted on a family member's property. The methods travel the same way they always have in rural communities: word of mouth at food pantries, at Wednesday night church suppers, at VA waiting rooms where veterans share what they know with other veterans who need it. Someone asked Earl why he spent 3 weeks rebuilding a rotting trailer for a woman he had only met twice before the project started. He said that when you have been in situations where nobody helps, and then somebody does, you do not forget what that feels like, and you spend the rest of your life trying to make other people feel it too. What Dorothy built for $447 in rural Alabama has survived 4 hurricane seasons, 2 ice storms, and the kind of summer heat that makes metal walls radiate. The yellow paint on the interior walls has faded slightly. The solar panels on the trailer roof have a fine layer of red Alabama dust that Marcus wipes down when he visits. The wood stove has a hairline crack near the base that Earl patched with furnace cement last winter. It is not perfect, but it is hers. And she is still in it, still cooking on her propane stove in the small trailer kitchen, still feeding the wood stove by feel on January nights, still counting her steps from the door to the bed in the dark, which for Dorothy is no different from counting them in the daylight. If resourcefulness like this matters to you, subscribing helps more people find this kind of content. And the video on screen right now documents a completely different off-grid build, with methods every bit as creative as Dorothy's. Click it and keep going. Keep